All right. This week, poems or koan? Poems or koan? Koans! Let's do a koan. All right, you're all familiar with the drill. So first time through, I'm just going to read it, and here we go. The koan runs thus. This is number 9 out of the big red book, Mumonkan. Once a monk said to Master Seijo of Koyo. Oops, that's the wrong one. That was number 8. I was reading that, that's wrong. Number 8. The one after the one we're doing. Number 8. Master Getan said to a monk, Ketchu made a cart whose wheels had 100 spokes. Take both front and rear parts away and remove the axle. Then what will it be? The commentary, Mumonkan's commentary. If you can immediately see through this, your eye will be like a shooting star and your spirituality like lightning. Mumonkan's poem. When the vividly working wheel turns, even an expert is lost. 4 directions, above and below, south, north, east and west. Okay, so what have we got going on here?
Did you read
The
original
koan?
Yeah.
Master Getan said to a monk, Ketchu made a cart whose wheels had 100 spokes. Take both front and rear parts away and remove the axle. Then what will it be? So, Master Getan was a teacher a generation or two, a couple of generations before Mumonkan in his lineage, so he's a Chinese Zen master. All Zen masters, true Zen masters, are going to be remarkable people, but within the history of the law, he was somebody of no particular note or consequence, as best I can tell. So there's no particular story associated with him. Ketchu is, as best I can tell, a mythological feature, an old, but certainly old, but probably mythological. Maybe the person who invented the wheel in China, somebody who used to be master cart maker a long, long while ago. So this mythological creature, this mythological person, made a cart whose wheel had 100 spokes. Take both front and rear parts away and remove the axle, and what will it be? So the obvious answer is, well, there's nothing left, right? There's nothing. Then you get caught, well, you know, is this pointing at impermanence, at the idea that, you know, the story of the chariot, where you change, it's a chariot, you change out the wheels, and you change out the ropes, and you change out this bit and that bit, and then when is it still the same cart? But what is left when you take away all the bits? Well, another way of looking at this is, look at yourself. What happens if once you take away your arms and your legs and your head and your body, what's left? Well, there is an old school of thought that would say, it's your soul, idiot. And there's a school of thought that would say, there's nothing, idiot. And if you're in the presence of Master Getan, if you said, it's your soul, idiot, he would hit you 20 times with a stick. And if you're in the presence of Master Getan and you said, it's nothing, idiot, he would hit you 20 times with a stick. What is left? There's a temptation to use the word emptiness, but emptiness is just a placeholder. It doesn't exist either. That's not right. It's the mystery. I mean, all there is left is the mystery. What is the mystery? We can't hold it. We can't touch it. And this koan is asking us to directly experience the mystery as mystery. Because if you recall, what in this tradition is done with the koans, it is taken as this, taken internally and becomes just this urgent question, the question of life, the universe, and everything. And it is held inside, in samadhi, until an answer breaks through. It's this profound experiential answer of just being the mystery. If you can immediately see through this, your eye will be like a shooting star and your spirituality like lightning. These are both pointing at spontaneity. I said these both, the shooting star and lightning. Spontaneity and freedom. You can't hold lightning. There's it's ineffable, it's indescribable, but this is the freedom, this is liberation, and there's something profoundly intimate about those expressions too. So the poem, when the vividly working wheel turns, even an expert is lost. I'm going to do my best to describe something here, but this is one of the, none of this can words really get to. But this is when the vividly working wheel turns, even an expert is lost. This is the unmoving mover, or the moving non-mover. This is actually, before I get to this, I'll say something else about what this is not, because what it is not is really important as well. This is not the oneness of the physician who is lost in his surgery, or the pilot who is concentrating on flying the plane, or the master craftsman, Ketchu, making the cart. Somebody who's just completely lost in that activity. We've all had experiences where we engage in something and get completely lost in that act. And a lot of the time people say, that's the Zen of oneness, that's the Zen of nothingness and oneness and total immersion. That's not what this is. That is a specific thing where there is union within that act, and then we come out of it. And there's a union within something limited and specific, but there isn't this intimacy with everything. And this is pointing at that intimacy with everything. So back to the poem. When the vividly working wheel turns, even an expert is lost. There's another story I read years and years ago, and I couldn't tell you where it is, of the monk who had this satori experience, this profound awakening, and in the immediate aftermath, the coins at this time, they used to be circular with a square hole in the middle, and they used to be carried on a knotted piece of string, and the monk was trying to thread the coins on the string and just couldn't get the coins on the string in the immediate aftermath of this satori. Stuff just couldn't come together. There's another story, for some reason, this is a relatively contemporary story within the last 20 or 30 years. For some reason, I'm pretty confident this person was an Australian woman, and she had this profound satori, and she just sat there, and I think it was for a couple of days, and then she said, I think it wants a cup of tea now. This I was also years ago now. I was sitting on a retreat with Shuhaku Okamura, who is a Soto Zen teacher, and I had this insight, or so it seemed to me at the time. And in this excited voice, where when they had the Dokusai, the interview with the teacher, in my excitement, I said, "I just had this really wonderful experience when I was sitting. I realised I'm not sitting; it is sitting." And he laughed and he said, "It's raining," and it's the same it. It's the same it. Take both front and rear parts away and remove the axle. And what will it? And I've just realised we could write that capital I, capital T. What will it be? It will be it. When the vividly working wheel turns, even an expert is lost. Can't thread the coins. It's just this wonderful feeling of Tathagata, thus come, thus gone. There's nobody there, but there's everything and nothing. Everything's moving, nothing's moving. 4 directions above and below, south, north, east and west. Be honest, that bit's a little opaque to me, but I think that's pointing at this everywhere, in all directions. There's no location. So that's what I have for you on this one, folks. What does that bring up? What are your thoughts, your experiences, your questions and your comments on this? Mushin, you dropped a question in the chat window, I saw. Let me see. True. I'll read it out loud. Regardless of the cart being made or not, you cannot add to it, nor can you take anything away from it. It never existed apart from the arising and falling away from everything else. But they're still looking at the cart as a cart. Ken.
Well, it is raining and it is you sitting. This gets into the perennial problem with Zen and Buddhism, trying to effable the ineffable, because by referring to it as an it, you've already made it a noun.
That's right.
So right off the bat, it's a classic example of you can't really talk about it. But it is sitting there meditating, even though you can't talk about it, you can get somewhat of a direct experience of it. And that's, as I see it, I hate to call it the goal, or certainly not the end result. It's one of the results of practice to get some insight. Pam and I have 3 dogs and a cat, and we talk to our dogs a lot. And I always refer to them as the entire universe pretending to be a dog. And we are also in the same boat. We are the entire universe And you can't even say that because the universe is also a noun, just like it, uh, which is why a lot of these koans, a lot of the Zen masters were poets. You know, they were
Yes, that's right.
poetry is a manipulation of language that evokes rather than tries to explain. And it's kind of hard to get there. I've said enough.
Yeah. Um, Thank you, Ken. What dilate a little on what you said. Um, it is ineffable. One can't talk about it, and yeah, we can talk about it. We talk about and around it. We can't
Right.
hold it in words, but we can talk around it. And you're right. The idea here of the language, and this is why poetry works, and myth and metaphor works, and why these stories, which are strange artifacts, also work, because they are not trying to describe something. They're trying to point at something. They're trying to dislodge in order to shift experience. So to say we can have an experience of it isn't quite right, because more closer is to say we can realize it. I mean, anything that goes to identity with it is also collapsing non-dual into single.
Yeah.
It's this
It's-
direct experience of it.
to say I am having an experience, you just created two nouns, I and experience, which is, yeah, it's tough. And you're absolutely right. You can talk kind of all around it, but there's that noun again, cannot be contained in language. And it's very irritating. And which is why, Gareth, I do not envy your position as guiding teacher of red clay because it is so damn difficult to teach. You know, I think you do an excellent job, but at the end of the day, you know, it's you kind of wonder how many people have I really been able to, you know, pull into this.
And how many
I think
people
it's I think it's a wonderful thing you're doing, but it is one of the most difficult things in the world that you have chosen to do.
yeah. But it's also, well, I mean, the three what are they? The three gifts, the three levels of gift. The gift of material goods, food, shelter, whatever, which is wonderful. The gift of the Dharma, which is also wonderful. But the
Right.
Buddha was offering the gift of freedom, true freedom, the end of suffering. What could be more important than working on the end of suffering?
Exactly.
Now, to be any good at it is a different matter. To take that on as a task is really a wonderful thing, a wonderful opportunity. Musha just put in a comment as well, using words to convey realities like going to a restaurant to order dinner only to eat the menu and not the food. I'm trying to remember a story. Two rats in a movie theatre wandering around, and they find themselves in the projection room at the top. And there's a reel of film on the floor. And one of them chews up the film. And the other one says, and then and then the other one says to it, "So how did you like the movie?" And the rat answers, "I preferred the book." What else, folks?
This one for me is very hard.
Very hard.
Yeah, it's opaque. It's I'm not finding a way in many of the other koans. I mean, I couldn't explain them to save my life, or even articulate inside my head. But I have a feeling this one, I'm just like,
Huh?
yeah, exactly. If you take away the front, you take away the back and the axle, you're left with the wheel. Dang it!
Yeah.
And of course, I know that's not right because it's a koan. But I'm like, no.
It is a hard one.
It is.
It is a hard. I mean, and these all. I don't know the architecture of the koan canon, but there are categories of koan that work in different ways, and that are of different levels of difficulty, and this does feel like a more difficult. The most useful way I can think of, maybe the most useful way, let's go back to so replace this story with the story of you. And when if you imagine, take your arms away, take your legs away, take all your body parts and your head and your feet and your hands away, what's left? And it is related to the chariot. If you change your arms, you just cut off an arm and put on a plastic arm, and you have some surgery and you get a replacement heart and all sorts of other things. At what point do you cease to be Beth? Don't replace anything, just take them away. What's left? And the core Buddhist teaching, if you remember, let's not say the core Buddhist teaching. The Buddha, when he talked about himself, when the Buddha's awakening, he said, I looked for a soul and I could not find it. I looked for Atman and I could not find it. But he did not say that there was nothing. Quite categorically. Talks of consciousness without surface, consciousness that does not land. Talks, and we'll be doing this tomorrow on Saturday with the Dharma Sutra. Awaken the mind that does not dwell.
Okay, how about this? If you took away all these different parts, well then I would be dead. And also, the Buddha was often asked what happens after we die, and he said, basically, it's unknowable. So that's kind of my feeling with the cart thing. And
yeah. So what is
so
this?
is that like an answer? It's like,
Almost. It's not, or it's. It's the.
No, that's called you've won a brand new car.
But you have. You've won all the cars. You've won the complete end of suffering. The complete and absolute end of suffering. Another one of my own stories that I've told you many times before, I think. Brother Shankar at the Vedanta Center and I were having dinner one night, and he said, Atman is that within which everything exists. It's like, that is exactly the same as Anatman, just seen from the other side.
Say that again.
Atman is that within which everything exists. Atman is not something to be held up as a god. Atman is that within which everything exists. It is the fabric. That's exactly the same as Anatman. It's exactly the same.
Well, doesn't that hold all the cart parts and yet none of them because they're not parts?
Exactly.
It's starting to feel a little more exciting.
It would be
It kind of felt that's related to Moshe saying, well, there's no cart. I'm sorry, I'm gonna butcher this, but there's no cart to begin with.
correct. There never was a card. It's all just a story. But it doesn't mean that there's nothing. Yeah, but to say there never was a card to begin with doesn't mean what's there is nothing. It's no thing, but it's not nothing. This is what we can't talk about. This is what we talk about. We can't name. We can't hold in a hand and reveal. We talk around it
It's the
and
mystery.
help ourselves realize that is truth. And when we realize truth, words like the peace of God which passeth all understanding come to mind. But they are no longer words, they are what is. It's the complete shedding of this story. What happens when you completely disassociate from this story? Not denying its existence, but completely disassociating with it and recognizing its fragmentary nature, and that all these bits that are assembled to make this story called me are just things happening. What's left? This is not Buddhist teaching, but it's out of the same school, the same family to me, and it's one I find a very useful way of looking at things like this. Purusha and Prakriti are two things that are taught. That is the Gita and the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Prakriti is basically the five aggregates. It's stuff. And Purusha, in Buddhist vernacular, would be consciousness that does not land, the mind that does not dwell. But in that teaching, what has happened is Purusha and Prakriti have encountered each other, and because it's so enticing, Purusha has gotten stuck in Prakriti and has come to believe it is Prakriti. And Prakriti finds this Purusha thing really wonderful. It's alive now. And it thinks that's part of it. So you've got this very strange thing happening, which is a complete illusion. And it is the root of all suffering. And when you take the wheels and the cart away, it's releasing Purusha from Prakriti. Now this it doesn't start to, it sounds very theistic, and it sounds, well, I'm God, but that's what happens when we start trying to use words to name the unnameable. Trying to start naming the mind that does not dwell. Ken and then, well, Katie and then Ken.
When you first read it, I was, and maybe, could you read it again?
Absolutely. Master Gekan said to a monk, Ketchu made a cart whose wheels had 100 spokes. Take both front and rear parts away and remove the axle. Then what will it be?
Is that the cart or the wheel?
The translation, there are other translations of this, and I didn't bring them with me, but the other translations make it clear that Chinese is structured very differently than English. Written Chinese is structured very differently than English, and some of the translations talk about the cart, some talk about the wheels, some talk about the spokes. You could look at this and you could say, well, the axle is the heart of our being, and this wheels, and you could philosophize around which bits are which, and that's interesting. But anyway.
Well, I guess if I think of it as it's referring to the wheel, which is what I thought it was.
Yeah.
And you take away the front and the back of the wheel and the axle, you're taking away the contact points. And that a wheel doesn't work unless it has friction on the ground. And if it has no rim and it has no axle, there's nothing to keep it going. And that sense of, and it's sort of like the bell. Is this a bell? Well, it's only a bell because it creates something that at the moment, and when you were talking about the skandhas and the contact and no place to land, that's sort of where my head landed with this koan.
And that, if you go to the poem says, when the vividly working wheel turns, even an expert is lost. That there's a valence in there that touches what you're talking about, Katie, as well. Thank you. Ken, you had something.
Yeah, the naming the unnameable, as you were mentioning earlier. The Hebrews, actually, you couldn't even, before they could even be called the people, the Hebrews or the Israelites, had the idea of the tetragrammaton, the YHWH, which could not be pronounced. But eventually they tried to pronounce it, where we got Yahweh. And in Genesis, there's actually a number of names for it. There's Yahweh, Elohim, Jehovah, God. When you give something a name, it comes with the illusion that you know it.
Right.
Lao Tzu had this same thing, probably around the same time, 500 BC. The Tao that can be spoken of is not the true Tao.
Yeah.
Um, so 2,500 years ago, I think people had an intuitive sense of that. But since that time, with our insistence on getting so boggled down in language, we are delusional. That's the problem. We try to name something that is not nameable, and you just go down the path of missing the whole point.
So Mushin put in the chat window, the cut only existed as thought. In the Prajna Paramita canon, this is all mind. So yes, the cut only existed as thought, and more powerfully, it is all mind. It is all mind. It's just the mind that does not dwell. And it really is all mind. Those aren't just empty words. And when that's difficult to pass for a number of reasons. We tend to think of our own mind, when we hear words like that, it only exists as thought, it's all mind. We think of our little minds. But our little minds actually aren't separate from all other little minds. And if you look at our little minds, we actually don't really grok our little minds either, because our little minds are actually lots of little minds. There is no theatre of the mind where it all comes together. There's lots of things going on. And we can tune into different minds. We can tune into intuitive minds. I was in Vietnam recently, as you know, and one of the conversations I had with Vietnam, one of the guys I was with, he was actually a tunnel rat, which are the guys who used to go down in the tunnels to flush out the Viet Cong, and then try and collapse the tunnels, which I can't imagine doing that, just terrifying. But he was talking about how he pretty quickly after he got there, he developed a sixth sense, and he had real experiences of where they were walking through the jungle. He said, "Oh, no." And he remembered one, he told me this story. He said there was one time he was walking and he stopped. He knew he shouldn't go that way, so he sent somebody else, and that person went and was shot, dead. There was another time when they were walking, he realized he shouldn't go, so they walked around and they found some other group. He says now he sometimes, it's very difficult for him. He says he'll be having a conversation with somebody, or he'll be introduced to somebody, and he'll just see them as a shadow, and he'll know that that person is very soon going to die. Could be a child. So this is real human experience. It's a sixth sense. It's just another sense that most of us don't have. But many of us in our own ways have these intuitive senses of when we're being watched, and there's lots of other mind out there that we have access to, but we don't really realize it, or that we have lost access to. This mind is far bigger and far more complicated than we think of. We only identify a small piece of it. So the world as we experience it is, if you want to think of it in these terms, it is a collective conscious experience. It is something that emerges from collective mind. So we can't disassemble what this little micro mind's doing. It's the whole thing. It's all mind, right? We can't separate ourselves from this. And that's the grand illusion, is this illusion of separateness, out of which all the rest starts cascading out. Mushin just put another one in the chat window. Perhaps we should just simply push the cart, which reminds me of another little Zen story. Which is actually somewhat of a koan, although I've not really seen it as a koan. But it's, do you beat the cart or do you beat the ox? Well, you beat the cart. We, most of the time, in our Western culture, we are trained and self-trained to think the work is the work of our minds, which in this case is the ox. It's that which we think is doing the work, that which we think is pulling and pushing. But actually, you get a lot of mileage by dropping down, and this is, being mindful of the body in the body. Beat the cart. True freedom is freedom from your own mind. Economic, political, social freedoms are freedoms of limited kinds. So when we look at ourselves and we get rid of our arms, we get rid of our legs, we get rid of our bodies and our heads, we just intuitively assume the mind is still there. And that's the problem when we're trying to solve this koan. That too goes. What else, folks? We can finish a few minutes early if nobody has anything else. But if you do, please speak up. Well, you've just taken it out to show us your face in a darkened room, Mushin. It's great to see you. But I do want to acknowledge the Bodhidharma, which was Mushin's screen there. Very appropriate for a Zen text. Thank you, sir. All right, well, with that, let's say good night all. See you again soon. It's great to see everybody.